So we are in this sermon series called Uncluttered, where we're talking about living lives that reflect the lifestyle of Jesus. So last week I said that our souls are not tired because we're just going through a season. Rather, that our souls are tired because we have accepted as normal a lifestyle that is not very healthy for our souls. So we all feel it. We all feel tired. We all feel rushed. And so what are we going to do about it? And so I put together a list of resources to help with this. And obviously, I don't expect you to pull out your phone and take a picture of this right now. You could. And then I'm going to talk how bad taking out your phones in service are in just a little bit. There's books that I have found helpful in this. There are right now media resources that you can go to for free, and you can watch that talk about these things. And how we can practice slowing down. And I hope that these will be helpful. The goal of this series is not to produce shame. It's to redirect the blame and to decide this is where we're going to go. And we're going to accept Jesus' invitation to do life differently. The verse that was just read is inviting us to a way of life that is so different from the way that we live. So last week we talked about the need to unravel ourselves from the chaos of our culture. And this week we're going to talk about the need to unplug. So a few years ago, there was a photojournalist by the name of Eric Smith, and he uploaded this photo that he took out on a sailing adventure. They had gone out to take pictures, and he's a photographer. And this photo went viral really quickly. It was this moment that was a once-in-a-lifetime moment that he captured, and when he posted it online, it just blew up. And here's the photo that he took. So you notice, imagine you're on a whale-watching trip, and you're snapping photos, and all of a sudden, you're like posting it online. Look how beautiful the horizon is or whatever. And the very thing that you came to look for, you totally missed. Can you imagine that? You paid the money. You go on this trip, you take all this time, and you end up distracted from the very reason why you were there. Later in the interview, Smith said that photo wasn't just about that one guy. This is all of us. Think about it. For all the convenience and the connection and the entertainment, all the things that we can get done with these dopamine enhancers in our pockets, inadvertently, we could end up at the end of our life looking back and realizing, man, I was distracted from the very reason that I was put here in the first place. We live in an unprecedented technological world. In 2019, on the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 moon landing, articles were written showing that the iPhone at that time, the iPhone in 2019 had over 100,000 times the processing power that the Apollo 11 had to land on the moon. It was estimated that a single iPhone could handle 120 million Apollo landings at once. Think about that for a moment. It's mind-blowing. But for technology being such a tremendous tool, it is a terrible master. So think about how much we use our phones and our screens. I came across some statistics this week. The average American spends about 7 hours and 4 minutes on screen time every day. That includes tablets, computers, phones. That doesn't take into account TVs, okay? When you're binge watching your favorite show. On average, people spend 44% of their waking hours on a screen. 49% of 0 to 2-year-olds interact with smartphones. Gen Z averages about 9 hours of screen time per day. The rest of it, they're sleeping, I guess. Last year, a survey found that on average, Americans check their phones 144 times a day. That's once every 7 minutes for when you're awake. That's not counting 24 hours. That's just estimating that you're awake for a certain period of time. Chances are, as you're sitting here, you've checked your phone. Maybe you're checking my statistics. Are they real? I'm okay with that. Proof text it. I'll cite it later. Some of you have your phones for work. I get that. Some of you have multiple phones. Like I've never moved to an area and saw people had 2 phones, and I was like, what are they doing? And if you have a third one, I know that you have the nuclear launch codes. We live in a unique area. Maybe you don't check your phone regularly, but I bet at home you always have something on. Whether it's the TV or the computer, maybe it's part of your routine. You listen to the news every morning. We have been inundated and immersed in our world. And the challenge isn't that we have technology. The challenge is how we uses it. The challenge is how we use that technology, or better, how it uses us. Any successful portrait. Y'all, I can't talk today. Slow that down. Any successful pursuit of a healthy soul in this culture is going to require us to be intentional, to be disciplined about how we use digital technology. We have to unplug. We are obsessed with our technology, particularly our smartphones, and we view this as a socially acceptable addiction. Why would I use the word addiction? An addiction, by definition, is a compulsive behavior in the short term that is undermining your well-being in the long term. We have become addicted to technology, and particularly our cell phones. Last week, I had you raise your hand for various things, and one of those was I just checked my phone for no random reason. For no particular reason, randomly, I'll just check my phone. Think about it. When you sit still for a moment, do you pull out a phone? And some of the older generation, you probably don't. But younger generation, I see it at red lights. We're at a red light. Light turns green. Nobody moves. Why? They're on a phone. Like, we can sit still and we have to pull out our phone, but it's even worse when we're not sitting still. How many times have I got on to my own children about stop looking at your phone while you're walking? Like, you're going to walk into a car. Epidemics of kids getting hit by vehicles because they're on their phones, not paying attention. Maybe you're texting and driving. You can't wait. You're at a restaurant with someone and you're having this conversation, and all of a sudden or you hear the notification and you are sending out, your brain gets a dopamine hit. And it feels good. Man, I want to check it out. It's impossible to not put that friend on hold and check your messages, because that dopamine hit felt really great. I want another. And this is why we are touching our phones 1 to 2 million times a year. And our short-term compulsive behavior is having a long-term impact on our health of our souls. Over and over again, studies are showing that obsession with screens has increased our level of anxiety, of depression, of obesity, and loss of sleep. Well, he says, my excuse. That was a joke. And we're only beginning to discover what it is doing to our kids. And I'm a parent with I have 4 kids. I have 3 living at home. My kids were born into this age. When I was a kid, we never were been on screens. Look, some of you, when you were a kid, you were lucky to have writing utensils. I'm sorry, that's not true. But here's the deal. Our kids were born into this digital world, and the levels of anxiety expressed by teenagers are the highest that they have ever been recorded. The spike in teenage anxiety has been charted to 2007. You know what happened in 2007? The iPhone came out. The spike in the rise of young teenage girls struggling with body image issues, studies show that it happened about 2011. You know what happened in 2011? Instagram came out. We get caught in this routine where we wake up, we check our phones, maybe it's to read a Bible, but then we get a notification and we're tagged off to that. So we check on Facebook, and that is just a slippery slope. And then we go to work and we stare at a screen all day at work, and then we come home and we eat, we plop on the couch, we play games. Maybe we spend time on Facebook again or Instagram or whatever other social media we use, and we go to sleep and we wake up the next morning and we do it all over again. Tish Warren Harrison writes this: we have everyday habits, formative practices that constitute daily liturgies. And by reaching for my smartphone every morning, regardless of my professed worldview or particular Christian subculture, my unexamined daily habit was shaping me into a worshiper of glowing screens. Examining my daily liturgy as something that's both revealed and shaped what I love and worship allowed me to realize that my daily practices were malforming me, making me less alive, less human, and less able to give and receive love throughout the day. What she is saying is that our daily practices show what we worship. And what we worship can either malform us or transform us. It's either going to reshape us into the image of Jesus or it's going to do the opposite. What is shaping us? Last week I asked the question, is it possible that what is behind so much of our weariness is the admission that we no longer go to Jesus whenever we need rest? We go to Netflix. We go to games on our phones, or a video game, or the gym, or even we go to some substance. And we allow those things to shape us. That is why Paul tells the Romans, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. Be totally shifted. It's like a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly, metamorphosis. We are changed more into the image of Jesus when we are allowing Jesus to be what we focus on and not necessarily the tools that we have. It isn't easy, is it? We are so easily distracted. We struggle to be present in the moment. Ask yourselves, does my use of technology improve my personal relationships? Does it serve people I'm actually close to and that I see in person? I mean, don't get me wrong, with my family not living local, when we can FaceTime when our babies were little, was amazing. To be able to text people from the other side of the world, how cool is that? And I'm thankful there's those ways that technology has been positive, but in other times, it becomes a way that we have undermined our personal relationships face to face. Because we build these pseudo relationships online and these connections with people that we never see. I want to remind you that you online, you are not the client of the products. You are the product. They are selling our attention, and they want us to stay on. And they know that the way to keep us engaged and the longest is to make us afraid or angry. And isn't it interesting what it does to us? What is all of this? They make money off of our anger and our fear. And what has this done to our souls? We're in an election year. Oh boy. And if this election year is any resemblance to the past, 50, it's going to be a rough year. And so the irony is, though, we have to ask, most of us agree that our phones and our social media platforms have turned into a problem, but we don't believe that we can turn down the noise. And my response to that is we can. You own those screens. They don't own you. But we're going to have to make some very hard choices. You see, the lie is that through social media, through online communities, that I am more connected than ever, when actually I'm spending less time in actual presence of other people than ever before. So I read this article. A friend sent it to me, and the New York Times reporter named Hal decided that he was going to try an experiment. He was very proud. He had 700 Facebook friends, and he decided that with all of those Facebook friends online, I'm going to invite them. Let's all get together for a drink. And so he sent out an invite. The RSVPs went out. Out of 700 people, 15 said, yes, I'm going to be there. About 60 said, I might make it. He thought, if I can get 20 people there, this is going to be a huge success. So he gets there very early that night. He shows up, reserves the tables, and he waits. One person shows up, and she wasn't even his friend. She was a friend of a friend who saw the event online, and she came, and they had a little bit of small talk, and then she left. He waited for a few more hours until midnight, and then finally he went and ordered himself something to drink. And he concludes his article with these words, 700 friends, but I was drinking alone. Digital distraction is robbing us of the ability to be present. Present to God, present to other people, present to all that is good and beautiful and true in our world, even present to our own souls. So this theological scholar comes up to Jesus, and he asks him, out of those 614 laws in the Torah, which law is the most important? And Jesus responds with these words. In Mark 12, he says, the most important is, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. And so I need your participation for just a moment. We're going to say, go on that next slide up, Farron. Thank you. So we're just going to say this together, love God, love others. Here we go. Love God. That's a nice rumble. Let's do that one more time. All right, great. So this is the signal. When I do this, you're going to say that. If you're online, say it too in your living room or car. Hopefully you're not watching while you're driving. I do that. Jesus says the whole law is summed up in these 2 points. That if you will have fulfilled the law. It's a call to obedience. And in our complicated, technologically digital age, we need to be reminded of his words again. Thank you. That should be your mantra all the time. Our purpose is to... You guys sound so enthusiastic. Here's the deal. There are so many competing voices, and they are fighting for your attention all the time. And yet Jesus' words still ring true. Maybe more now than ever. Love God and love others. Jesus becomes for us the frame of reference of what it means to love. What's it supposed to look like? That word gets thrown around a lot. We know that. And as I started thinking, what was the defining mark of how Jesus loved others? I think when you look at the Gospels, one of the most defining marks that we need to reclaim in our digital age is Jesus' ability to be radically present. In fact, Landon Saunders, who just passed away, he used to say, what you see with Jesus when he was talking to people who were to become counselors, he would say, we have to reclaim Jesus' example of being a radical human presence. It was out of love that Jesus was present. First and foremost, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. That is through Jesus' love that he is present at the incarnation, when the Word became flesh, when he became in the flesh as a human God, putting on skin so that he could communicate with us. This is what love looks like. It is one of the most foundational beliefs that we have as followers of Jesus. And when you look at Jesus' life and relationships, that continues to happen. You realize he was very present to his community. If you read through the Gospels and you read through Jesus' teachings, you start realizing that most of the time he's talking to the disciples who are just missing it, are just a bunch of boneheads sometimes. And they ask these questions. And Jesus is like, don't you get it? But even though they made bad mistakes, even though they put their foot in their mouth many times, even though they missed everything and were frustrated, because I would be frustrated, Jesus was present with them constantly like a good shepherd. He doesn't give up on them, but he's committed to them, and he is present with them. Over and over again, Jesus shows love to others. When this prostitute comes into Simon the Pharisee's house where Jesus is reclining to eat, and she comes and she starts washing his feet with her tears, and then she pours this alabaster jar of oil out and she's wiping it with her hair. How in the world why would you do that? That's horrible. The scandal. Jesus does not push her away. He is present with her, and he values her. So many times when Jesus is walking or is healing somewhere or he's interrupted, a lot of times he doesn't say, talk to the hand, I don't have time. He turns and he's present with that person. Sometimes he just says, what do you need me to do? Sometimes Jesus heals. Sometimes he just speaks with them. Sometimes he teaches. And sometimes he rebukes, but he is always present in the moment. Jesus models for us a love for others that is not distracted, but is present. Think about in your homes and your use of technology, whatever that technology is. Do you go to work all day and you're surrounded by this technological world that we live in, and you come home and you're so wrapped up in checking scores or checking updates or online arguments or whatever's going on that you miss the people that are running around your house, little feet that are begging for your attention? Or maybe they're adult children, or your wife or your husband, and you're so wrapped up in there that you forget about here. So I've started to reflect on my own life and on the patterns that I have. One of the great pitfalls is that we have lost the art of being present. And we're waning on our ability to be where we are. We need to turn down the noise that is wearing out our souls. The gospel tells us how we do that. Jesus reveals this. He's intentional about spending silence and solitude with God. In fact, when his disciples come back from being gone, Jesus says, I read this last week, let's withdraw to a place so you can rest. In Luke chapter 5, we read about that very early in the morning, Jesus withdrew to lonely places and he prayed. Silence, solitude, time with God, these were important to Jesus. And if it was important to Jesus, why in the world would it not be important to you? If Jesus had to get away for silence and solitude, what makes us think that we don't? One of the greatest things that I learned about when I moved to Northern Virginia, I don't know if it was great. It was a warning, actually. The pace of this area is so much. Don't let it speed you up. I'm going to talk about this next week, but let me tell you what. I go home to Louisiana. I'm like, will you move? People driving 55 in a 55-mile speed limit. I'm like, what is this? Here, the speed limit signs are merely suggestions. I don't like silence. I don't like stillness. I'm a people person. But silence is important because it creates this space where we can assess, how is my soul doing? Today, it is possible to live and to never have to be without noise. You can do it. In fact, it's normal. In his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer writes this: the noise of the modern world tunes us out to the voice of God. We drown out the one input we desperately need. How can we have any kind of spiritual life at all if we can't pay attention longer than a goldfish? How do you pray, read scriptures, sit under a teaching at church, or rest when with every chance you get, you reach for the dopamine dispenser in your pocket? I'm not saying you need to get rid of your smartphone or your TV. I like the maps because I would be lost in this area. I also like Waze because it lets me know there's a cop ahead. Sorry to our former police officers, or current. I'm not saying you have to just get rid of all your technology, but what I am asking you is that how are you going to steward that technology in a way that's good for your soul? Are you a disciple of Jesus? Because if you are, then everything in your life comes under the lordship of Jesus Christ, and he is the filter by which you determine how you're going to use everything or do everything. The goal is for you to be healthy in your soul. Why? Because your soul is where you commune with God, and God is a talker. I loved hearing that a while back, that God is a talker. He loves to commune with us. But when our souls are so inundated with all this noise, we lose the space and even the capacity to hear from God. One of the most challenging things for me one time was being at a retreat. And the speaker, we were singing, and he said, we're just going to have 5 minutes of silence. I tell you what, I thought for sure it was like 30 minutes. I was like, surely we're there. It'd have been 30 seconds because we're so unused to that. So one day, Jesus and his disciples go out on a boat. They're crossing the lake. And Jesus gets in this boat and he falls asleep. Soon the winds pick up. And the waves are crashing against the boat. The storm has gotten out of hand. And the disciples are trying their best to just hang on there, but they're scared because the waves are starting to come over into the boat. And Jesus, he's just sleeping through this whole thing. They begin to call out, Master, Master, don't you care what's happening to us? Don't you care that we're about to be capsized? And Jesus wakes up. And I wonder if he was grumpy. He woke up and he goes to the winds and the waves and he tells them, peace, be still, be silent. The winds die down and the waves start to subside. And he looks at his disciples and he goes, why were you afraid? Where's your faith? I'm in the boat. What you give your attention to determines the health of your soul. And Jesus said there's only one thing that you must absolutely prioritize to give attention to. And here's the thing. I believe that most of us really love God. You're here because you love God. I absolutely know that. But that doesn't mean that you absolutely prioritize making time for God. In the Bible, nobody runs with God. Did you ever notice that? Nobody runs with God. They walked with God. Because here's the deal. God is not going to fight for time to fit into your busy schedule. Here's what you need to know about anybody you really love and you want to connect with. Attention requires intention. I love my wife. And if I'm not intentional about giving her attention, she's going to begin feeling like I don't really care about her. If my kids don't get my attention, what does that say to them? To give somebody your full attention, you have to want to give them your full attention. You have to you have to mean it, you have to plan it, you have to be intentional. The biggest obstacle to the life you have and the life you want is the lifestyle that you and I are living now. And so you want to unplug? Great. Joel and Lori right now are teaching a class in Maymester, and if those of you who are Maymester, if you have not attended that one, you should go. Because they are talking about how do we deal with this sort of thing in our homes. We have to shepherd, we have to steward our technology. Because if not, it's going to steward us. So can you unplug to live each day more fully aware of God, to be at a place where you say, God, I hear you saying, be still and know. What if we took a fast from always feeling like we needed to be plugged in? I think your soul would thank you. I know your family and friends would too. The boat of life in which we live faces a lot of storms. And if you don't believe that, All you got to do is look around. And at times it seems that the cares and the fears and the hurt of this world are not only beating on us, but they are beginning to affect us deeply inside. The water's not only hitting our boat, the water is getting into our boats. Storms are inevitable. And we need to be sure that we have Jesus in our boat. What are we afraid of? Intentionality. Let's pray. God, thank you for being present with us, even when we aren't present with you. Forgive us when we've been so distracted. Father, my biggest burden for my life is that I will preach this sermon to myself, and I will walk out of here and make nothing change. My prayer today for myself and for every person in this room is that your Holy Spirit puts such a burden on our hearts that we can't help but stop thinking about it. And maybe, God, you work how you work, and we trust you in that, but God, we need you to help our souls get healthy. Thank you for Jesus. The example that we have, help us to live fully into the promise of who he is. God, empower our church. Help us to be Jesus in all things. Pray this in the name of him. Amen.